From the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
Retired NASA astronaut Mark Kelly blasting off on a new adventure as he announces a run for the U.S. Senate.
Plus, moms demanding action for gun sense in America. The message activists here in Arizona hope to send to domestic abusers.
And in God we trust, the backlash a free speech group is getting for these specialty license plates and the money they're making off them.
Cronkite News starts now.
Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Haley Brandt.
And I'm Bayan Wang. Thank you for joining us.
This morning, retired NASA astronaut Mark Kelly launched his campaign for U.S. Senate in Arizona. He made the announcement via Twitter, calling it his next mission.
Kelly is the husband of former Democratic Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, who survived a mass shooting in Tucson in 2011. Cronkite News reporter Bryce Newberry joins us live with the details.
The announcement came early this morning on Twitter in a 4.5-minute video. One political analyst told me today this comes as no surprise, and Mark Kelly says this is his next mission.
But what I learned from my wife is how you use policy to improve people's lives.
Before 6 o'clock this morning, the Navy combat veteran and retired NASA astronaut Mark Kelly taking to Twitter to announce his 2020 campaign.
I care about people. I care about the state of Arizona. I care about this nation. So because of that, I've decided that I'm launching a campaign for the United States Senate.
The Senate seat he's vying for, currently held by Senator Martha McSally. She was appointed by Governor Doug Ducey in December. Before that, it was the late Senator John McCain's seat.
Arizonans are facing incredibly challenging issues here in the years to come.
Those issues, Kelly says, are access to health care, wages, job growth, the economy, and climate change. Kelly has flown in 39 combat missions in Operation Desert Storm. He was selected as astronaut in 1996, flying 4 missions through 2011. He spent more than 50 days in space on the International Space Station. Kelly moved to Arizona in 2012 after his wife, Gabrielle Giffords, was shot at an event at a Tucson supermarket.
A gunman shot Arizona Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords.
Since then, he's helped lead the organization Giffords, aiming to unite veterans, law enforcement, gun owners, faith leaders, and Americans to reduce gun violence.
But what do you do when bad things happen?
Move ahead.
You gotta move ahead.
Yes.
Some critics say Kelly might be moving ahead too quickly. It's the first time he's run for public office, and a big one at that. Chuck Coughlin is the CEO of a Phoenix public affairs consulting agency.
It's very difficult for somebody to understand how hard that is. 24-hour, 365, gripping and grinning, be on all the time, be pleasant, be spontaneous, be, whereas, a combat pilot and an astronaut they have checklists.
With or without a checklist, Coughlin says Kelly's campaign has momentum.
It will be a very serious threat to the Republicans' control of John McCain's Senate seat.
So far, Kelly is the first person to announce his candidacy. Congressman Ruben Gallego tweeted this morning he'll make an announcement in the coming days about whether or not he'll run. In the interest of transparency, we did want to let our viewers know Kelly's daughter Claire is a reporter here at Cronkite News on the education reporting team. Live in the studio, Bryce Newberry, Cronkite News.
There are currently 3.8 million active voters in Arizona. That's 66,000 more since the general election just 2 months ago, according to Secretary of State Katie Hobbs. So Arizona now has about 1.3 million registered Republicans, 1.2 million independents, and 1.1 million Democrats. The rest of voters fall under other parties, including the Libertarian and Green Party. And there are still around 525,000 inactive voters. Tonight is the final mayoral debate before the March 12th election. Kate Gallego and Daniel Valenzuela will go head-to-head on issues like water security and affordable housing. They're vying to replace Greg Stanton, who resigned last year to run for Congress. Both Gallego and Valenzuela have served on the city council before. The debate starts at 7 p.m. at the Phoenix Public Library. The audience will get to ask questions, but there is limited seating, so you should register first by going to the Phoenix Public Library's website.
California and New Mexico have both pulled most of their troops from the U.S.-Mexico border within the last week. So, will Arizona follow suit? Cronkite News reached out to Governor Doug Ducey's office, and it looks like our troops are staying put. Ducey's Director of Communications released a statement saying Arizona's National Guard members continue to serve as a force multiplier along our border, surging more badges to the border in the face of continued threats from drug smugglers and human traffickers. The governor appreciates their continued efforts to protect the safety and security of our communities.
6 migrant families who were separated at the border under President Trump's zero-tolerance policy have filed legal claims against the U.S. government. The families are seeking millions of dollars of compensation for what they call cruel treatment and agonizing trauma. But does the lawsuit have feet? Reporter Austin Westfall asked that question to a local immigration expert. Austin?
As the national conversation focuses on border security and building the wall right now, these newly filed claims put the spotlight back on the separated families that dominated the headlines last year.
They've not tried to hide the fact that it was done to cause harm, as a warning to other people to not come. And so I think that's a big problem for the government.
Phoenix immigration attorney Margarita Silva says the White House should have a price to pay for the implementation of its policy separating immigrant families at the southern border last year. The Trump administration's goal was to deter others from trying to come to the United States.
And the deterrent is that it causes the family members hardship and pain. And so that's, intentionally causing some kind of pain to someone, and the hardship that it's causing, we don't do that. We don't do that in the United States to someone intentionally for any reason.
Lawyers with the Washington, D.C.-based firm Arnold & Porter have filed a claim on behalf of 6 migrant families. In a statement, the firm says they each deserve $3 million for the cruel treatment and agonizing trauma they have suffered at the hands of U.S. immigration agencies. One of the immigrant mothers, identified as Letitia, is also quoted saying, in part, "It was the worst moment of my life when officers tore my crying daughter from my arms. I didn't know where she was going or when I'd see her next, and I couldn't tell her she'd be safe. It was 4 months and 1 day until I saw her again."
Walls work.
As the claims were announced, President Trump was gearing up for his blockbuster rally in El Paso, Texas, focusing primarily on the border wall and security. Back in Phoenix, Silva says the White House will likely respond to the claim.
They're going to ask to dismiss the case right off, which is typical in a civil case, where the government will respond saying, well, we're not even going to answer the specific claims, but these people don't have a right to file a lawsuit in the first place.
The claims were submitted to the Departments of Homeland Security and Health and Human Services under the Federal Tort Claims Act. The act gives government agencies 6 months to respond before a potential lawsuit is filed. Live from the Broadcast Center, Austin Westfall, Broadcast.
Congressional negotiators have reportedly reached a deal on a budget that does not include the $5.7 billion that Donald Trump wants for a border wall. That has not stopped the president from pushing for his wall, including a pitch yesterday to a group that had several receptive Arizona officials in it. Alyssa Klink has more from our Washington bureau.
National Congress of American Indians President Jefferson Keel said the Indian country is hit particularly hard.
Another plea for a border wall.
It's a much better wall, much stronger wall, and a much less expensive wall than we've been building. And we're going to have a lot of wall being built in the next period.
The group, in town for a National Sheriff's Association meeting, didn't need much convincing.
I think that the problems that other sheriffs are facing that kind of come up from the border, they're having the opiate crisis, they're having MS-13, they're having gang violence.
Problems, say Yuma County Sheriff Leon Wilmot and Pima County Sheriff Mark Napier, that a border wall would help address.
Our federal partners have identified weaknesses in and along our border that need to be addressed to help them better perform their function for enforcement.
Neither sheriff wanted to get into the politics of the situation. They just want to see something done.
For politicians to get into this and come up with an arbitrary number of 55 miles or whatever it is again denying the realities on the ground.
And both agree that while a wall is not the only solution, it's still needed.
Yes, there are tunnels that can be done up underneath a fence, but you also need that fence because that's a deterrent.
Wilmot said a wall could help in other ways, possibly keeping migrants from trying the dangerous track.
It's cost taxpayers in Yuma County $700,000 on treating these individuals for those injuries that they sustained last year alone.
They were joined at the White House by County Sheriff Mark Lamb, but Napier said he thinks every sheriff in the state would agree more needs to be done.
In my home state, there are 15 sheriffs, and we all get along. We all sing to a common tune of dedication to public safety.
In Washington, Alyssa Klink, Cronkite News.
An Arizona gun control bill gets bipartisan support that would keep guns out of the hands of domestic abusers. Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America stood with survivors of gun violence to voice their support for Senate Bill 1219. Ariel Salk was at the state capitol for the news conference and rally.
If Senate Bill 1219 gets passed, convicted domestic abusers can no longer own a firearm. Current state law prohibits those on probation from having a firearm, but once that probation is over, they can have a weapon. 195 Arizonans have been killed by a partner in a domestic violence dispute between 2013 and 2017, according to an analysis of the FBI violent crime data done by Everytown for Gun Safety. The data also shows that more than half of those were shot. Representative Heather Carter joined the press conference to express why she's championing the bill.
The presence of a gun during a domestic violence incident makes it 5 times more likely that a woman will be shot and killed. It's an embarrassment for Arizona, and we can do so much better.
I spoke with Charles Heller from the Arizona Citizens Defense League about the Senate bill. He said, quote, "It's stupid and unnecessary, and it's already illegal." I spoke to Jessica Manos, chapter leader for Arizona's Moms Demand Action, and she shared this response. Although there is a federal legislation on this, it's hard to enforce because you can't send the FBI for every single gun offense in Arizona. Live from the Media Center, Ariel Salk.
A controversy over specialty license plates bearing the words "In God We Trust" has some lawmakers pushing to ban them altogether.
We look into what sparked the heated debate over the plates next.
Plus, it was a big weekend for female wrestlers in Arizona. We'll take you to the first ever girls wrestling tournament in the state.
As journalists at Cronkite News, we report on stories that matter to you by focusing on the local impact. We dig deeper and work tirelessly to keep you informed.
Live in Wickerburg.
Live in Los Angeles. In Cleveland. In Washington. In Louisville.
From Jerusalem. Live in Philadelphia.
From around the world to right here in Phoenix.
At Cronkite News, we report the facts and stick to the truth.
I'm Judy Woodruff, anchor and managing editor of the PBS NewsHour. The journalists of tomorrow face a fast-changing media landscape, but quality news remains vitally important to our communities, our country, and our world. At ASU's Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication, students learn solid, reliable reporting, holding the powerful accountable, and rebuilding the public's trust. The Cronkite School and Arizona PBS, preparing the next generation for a stronger future of journalism.
I started watching Horizon. It was all about local, detailed information, interviewing representatives, the debates. It was all local, and having moved here from Minnesota, I really didn't have a lay of the land. So it was a way to get details on the new state I'd moved to. And I liked it. It wasn't combative, it was informative. It was just, here's the facts. That sucked me in quite quickly.
For more information about including Arizona PBS in your future plans, visit azpbs.org/giving.
Former First Lady Michelle Obama is headed to downtown Phoenix tonight. Ms. Obama is headed to Comerica Theater for the next stop of her book tour. She'll discuss parts of her bestseller, Becoming, including some of her experiences that shaped her life from her childhood in Chicago to her years spent at the most famous address in the world. Heavy volumes of traffic are expected downtown tonight ahead of Ms. Obama's arrival, so be sure to give yourself a little extra time if you plan to be in the area.
An Arizona lawmaker is introducing a bill to get rid of the "In God We Trust" specialty license plates. Cronkite News reporter Nicole Hernandez explains the controversy.
Specialty license plates are plentiful on Arizona's streets, but to get one, you have to pay a fee. That fee goes towards nonprofit organizations, one being the Alliance Defending Freedom, or ADF.
There are some 60 organizations that participate in different license plates, so it's widely used by the community and all kinds of different groups.
But this plate is getting backlash for raising more than $800,000 for what's been called a hate group.
That's their right to have their hateful views and to push their hateful policies, but we shouldn't be using the government to help them raise the money to do it.
2 new bills, if passed, would give drivers information on what organization each plate funds and get rid of the In God We Trust plates altogether.
The whole license plates program is a problem, and it's just ripe for these kinds of people to take advantage of the state government to help them raise money.
ADF sponsored the creation of the plate in 2008. They say their organization fights for freedom of speech and not hate.
We stand for the rights of all Americans, all walks of life, all faiths and no faith. What matters is that the right of free speech and our right to practice our faith and to live consistent with our core beliefs is protected.
Arizona Department of Transportation gave us this statement, saying, quote, ADOT's role is to make it available to customers and distribute the funds generated from the plate sales as required in the law. In Phoenix, Nicole Hernandez, Cronkite News.
State Senator Mendez has 1 week to get the bills heard on the Senate floor.
The Arizona Interscholastic Association introduced the first ever girls wrestling tournament to the state this past weekend. Thousands of people came to see the inaugural event at the Findlay Toyota Center on Friday. Nearly 150 girls participated in the 10 different weight classes. Each division winner will compete in the national championship in Oklahoma City this March.
A new study shows 2018 was the 4th hottest year on record. So what impact does that have on Arizona?
Coming up next on Cronkite News, we investigate how climate change is affecting tribal communities.
Bye for tonight, but what about the rest of your work week? Your Valentine's Day forecast coming up.
ESPN Sports Center anchor and graduate of ASU's Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication. With its bachelor's and master's degrees in sports journalism, the Cronkite School is preparing the next generation of sports journalists to tell stories that matter, stories that excite, inspire, and inform. Cronkite immerses students in covering sports at all levels in one of the country's top sports markets. It's this hands-on experience under the guidance of award-winning sports media veterans that shape the top journalists of tomorrow.
As the concern around climate change grows, the House Natural Resources Committee met in Washington to discuss the impact on climate change in tribal communities. Let's send things over to Cronkite News reporter Micah Bledsoe in our Washington, D.C. bureau with more. Micah?
With the House now under Democratic control, the focus of committee hearings is starting to shift. For the House Natural Resources Committee, that means looking at climate change. And today it was looking at how climate change affects tribal lands. Verlin Jose, the vice chairman of the Tohono O'odham Nation, said many tribes just don't have the resources to respond.
The isolation, the road conditions, just we are not ready for climate change. We will survive. We will survive one way or another. However, it would be very important that we join forces to address climate change.
He was one of 3 tribal representatives testifying today. For his tribe, the effects are already being felt.
Some of the impacts that we had with flooding, and where 3 communities had to be removed, where a dam almost overcrested with water because we had received 8 inches of rain in less than 6 hours.
Democrats last week unveiled a sweeping Green New Plan that aims to ease climate change by aggressively shifting the U.S. toward renewable energy. But Nick Loris said the Green New Deal will not help, and it will particularly not help tribal areas, he believes.
If you are restricting energy use, and not letting tribal communities develop their resources, which oftentimes they want to do, I think you're depriving them of opportunities to actually make a better living for themselves and potentially protect against a changing climate.
Loris says it's clear man-made emissions are driving global warming and that tribal communities are vulnerable to its effects. The answer to that, he says, is complete tribal autonomy.
If you are not letting them develop their resources or not letting them prosper, they're not going to have the resources to protect themselves against the changing climate.
Jose says the Tohono O'odham are doing what they can, but they can't fight climate change alone.
It's not an Arizona thing. It's not a Washington, D.C. thing. It's not a U.S. thing. It's a world issue. And where is America when we come to address the challenges of climate change?
Jose is not the only one raising the alarm about the effects of climate change on tribal communities. In his State of Indian Nations address on Monday, National Congress of American Indians President Jefferson Keel said the Indian country is hit particularly hard. In Washington, Micah Bledsoe, Cronkite News.
Representative Warren Peterson is sponsoring a new bill to make Arizona's state drink lemonade. So today we asked our followers on social media what they thought our state beverage should be. And the overwhelming #1 answer so far is margaritas.
Some users had their own ideas about what should be our state's official drink. Martha Lemon said lemonade will work if you add tequila. Christina Holland agreed. She tweeted, "Tequila sunrise, let's bring it back."
And Dave Rublin suggested Arnold Palmer be Arizona's state drink, while John Glenn tweeted water. It's not too late to join the conversation. Just go to our Cronkite News Twitter feed to vote in our live interactive poll.
And now Lauren Sheeler is standing by with a look at our weather forecast.
Well, it was a cold start to the day, but we still managed to climb up to 70 degrees here in Phoenix. We're going to stay dry tonight, but then tomorrow morning, it's back to the cold. And as you're getting those kids out the door tomorrow early morning, they're going to need the jacket. You're going to certainly need the jacket. 50s for 7 a.m. But then when you're picking them up after late afternoon, we're on the warm up again, staying dry into this upper 60s. So dry tomorrow, dry for the day after, but then here's the shift. Temperatures on the decline, dew points on the rise. And what this means is dew point is the temperature that the atmosphere needs to be for saturation to occur. So the closer the dew point is to the actual temperature outside, the closer our chances are for rain, which we are certainly in store for, unfortunately, for the rest of the work week. Whole batch of rain coming in, covering the majority of our state just in time for Valentine's Day. But if that's not the news you're hoping to hear, if you have plans late in the evening, you actually should be fine. We should clear out late, talking 6, 7, 8 p.m. The prime spot, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. That's when you're going to want to keep an eye out for rain showers. That's the concern. And this actually seems to be the trend. Taking a look at the next 9 days, we're seeing precipitation move in. And look at the highs, temperatures on the decline for the next 9 days. We're hoping to see some sort of warm up for the week after. For Cronkite Weather, I'm Lauren Sheeler.
Straight ahead on Cronkite News, a local athlete thought he lost his favorite thing when he woke up a quadriplegic after suffering from a collapsed lung. But now that athlete is getting a second chance to play his favorite sport.
With wildfires, a scarcity of water, and other environmental issues facing the Earth today, it's critical to stay up to date with local impacts of a changing climate. That's why we created Elemental, Covering Sustainability, a multimedia collaboration between public television and radio stations. From climate change to water conservation to renewable energy and much more, Elemental covers the latest in sustainability news. Find our stories on our website, elementalreports.com.
I'm Matt Berry, ESPN Sports Center anchor and graduate of ASU's Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication. With its bachelor's and master's degrees in sports journalism, the Cronkite School is preparing the next generation of sports journalists to tell stories that matter, stories that excite, inspire, and inform. Cronkite immerses students in covering sports at all levels in one of the country's top sports markets. It's this hands-on experience under the guidance of award-winning sports media veterans that shape the top journalists of tomorrow.
After suffering a collapsed lung due to severe asthma, Gabe Trujillo fell into a coma where he would wake up 4 days later unable to move his arms and legs. Cronkite News reporter Sienna Villa learned how that hasn't stopped him from playing the sport he loves.
At 14 years old, Gabe Trujillo woke up from a 4-day coma, no longer having the ability to move his arms or legs. After 8 months of rehabilitation, doctors would tell him he was quadriplegic.
I was no longer that regular kid. I was now a guy who uses a wheelchair to get around. So it was definitely a different change, definitely a shock to the system to try and come up with a whole new way of life.
Gabe's new way of life wasn't a challenge only for him, but his father as well.
As a parent, trying to figure out or thinking, what do we do to help him move on in life was a hard challenge.
Stripped of the ability to play his favorite sports, Gabe thought he would always have to sit on the sidelines until he found Arizona Disabled Sports, where their motto is, let no one sit on the sidelines. And ever since then, Gabe has been playing power soccer.
From the minute I rolled in and saw these guys rolling around the court with a plastic guard strapped to their wheelchair, I was hooked immediately. But I came across this sport, it showed me that athletes come in all shapes and sizes, that just because you're in a wheelchair, that doesn't mean you can't be an athlete.
AZDS is a nonprofit organization with over 1,000 athletes participating year-round and is always welcoming new members. In Mesa, Sienna Villa, Cronkite News.
Trujillo and the organization will be gearing up for the Desert Challenge Games in May.
Cronkite News is proud to be the news division of Arizona PBS. Here's what's coming up on Arizona Horizon in PBS NewsHour.
On the next Arizona Horizon, we will get a legislative update from Republican leaders, and we'll ask Congresswoman Debbie Lesko about the government shutdown and more. That's on the next Arizona Horizon.
A look at new laws to permit students to voice their safety concerns. That's Tuesday on the PBS NewsHour.
That's it for Cronkite News tonight. Thanks for joining us. For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.